The following information has not been approved by Nimble Storage, by Apple, by Studio Network Solutions, by your mom, no one. Use it at your own risk. Previously, we had installed the GlobalSan initiator from Studio Network Solutions. Now we're going to carve up two volumes that we're going to use for our XSAN file server. Now I need two volumes, one for the actual data and one for the metadata, which keeps track of file locking and which computers are using which files within the volume store. First, I'm going to build the data volume. I'm going to name it for the server, which is named Gala, plus a function, which is file server, and then what volume this is, which is the data volume. I have the option in Nimble Storage of performance policies, which will set the native block size and whether the volume is going to use cache or compression. In this case, I'm going to set for cache and compression turned on. Next, I'm going to limit access to my volume so that only the clients and servers in the Mac server initiator group can hook on to these volumes. I've also enabled multiple initiator access to let more than one computer talk to that volume simultaneously. I'm going to set the file size. In this case, I'm going to build a file server 1.2 terabytes in size. Then I'm going to set up the protection for the volume via a volume collection. Now, a volume collection is a collection of volumes that are snapshotted, in other words, backed up all at the same time and can be replicated together. Here I've created a volume named for the XSAN and file server, and then I've already got a protection template built that has my preferred backup and replication schedule built into it. So I don't have to fill in all these boxes. Click Finish, and we're off to the races. Our first volume is built. Now that that volume is created, I can look in my volume list and I'll see that first volume if I pull down here. See Gala file server data. That's my data volume. Now I've got to create a second volume. This one I'm going to use for the metadata. I'm going to repeat the same steps as before. In this case, obviously, I'm going to label this volume for the metadata. Going to use the same performance policy and basically repeat all of the same steps that we did earlier on the first volume. Difference is obviously metadata is not as big as real data, so I don't have to build it quite as large as that first volume. So here I'll just create this volume for 100 gigabytes. Plenty of room for the metadata. I'm going to click Next, add that volume into the volume collection that I created earlier. And now that volume will be snapshotted alongside the actual data volume, keeping the data and the metadata in sync. And that quickly, I've got a volume collection, and here are my two volumes for the file server data and the file server metadata. And it's really that easy. Nothing's connected to them yet. We're going to go there next. I use Apple Remote Desktop to administer my metadata server. My metadata server is a Mac Mini. Here it is here, so we'll open up his console real quick. Now we need to go into System Preferences and open the GlobalSan initiator. I've installed this previously. We see I have some other volumes already attached for some other LUNs, but we're going to create a new one here. So this requires a password every time. Thank you, Studio Network Solutions, for that. We'll say OK. And now I'm going to go ahead and do a rescan. Expand this so we can see everything that's happening here. When I rescan, two volumes show up immediately. If I look in the middle, I can actually see the file server name that I created on the Nimble. So I'm going to select the first one. I'm going to try to connect to it, and it won't connect. And the reason is there's this option up here that I have to click. It says always send session type when connecting. We need to do that for Nimble Storage. Go ahead and click persistent here. That will allow the volume to reattach every time the server reboots. Now I don't want to initialize at this point. We'll do the initialization a little bit later via the XSAN. So I'm going to repeat those same steps. Always send session type, done, make it persistent, and it's connected, green light, ignore that. And now we're going to go into the XSAN. Normally you'll open the XSAN admin utility from the server menu. I keep the XSAN in the dock because I'm there a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and manage the existing SAN. So enter your credentials, go into the XSAN console. Once you're there, what you want to do is go to the LUNs menu. And within the LUNs, you'll see the two new LUNs that we connected, but they have no labels yet. From a management standpoint, it's a pretty good idea to label those LUNs for what you're going to be using it for. So that's going to be the first step. If we look over to the menu on the left, we'll go to LUNs. And from there, we see the two there. So I'm going to choose the metadata LUN first. Go ahead and change his LUN label and give him the appropriate name. In this case, we'll name him for the file server. After that, we'll do the same thing for the data LUN. Now that my LUNs are labeled, I can go ahead and create the new SAN volume. So it's easy as click the little plus sign down there at the bottom, give it a label. Now in this case, we're going to label it for a file server. Now you also select the volume type, and that will have everything to do with how many LUNs that you need. For example, the high definition video volume type here requires 4 different LUNs to work correctly. A file server only requires 2, the data LUN and the metadata LUN. Now, within the additional setting size, I can actually set the block storage. Best practice from Nimble is the block size within this LUN should be the same size or larger than the block size you set on the Nimble. Now, I'm going to drag my affinity tags over. Pardon me, I'm going to drag my data onto the affinity tags to tell the XSAN which types of data go on which LUNs. Go ahead and say continue. Now this error is innocuous. On a traditional SAN, you would use multiple LUNs to achieve the level of performance needed for video or audio post. With Nimble storage, it's really not necessary to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and create the volume, and we'll see it attached here to my metadata server, the Mac Mini, and there it is. It appears to be just a normal hard drive, so I can go ahead and copy some files to it. And the next part coming up is going to be how to attach or reattach your clients to your metadata controller. And the graphic for that is going to look just like this. Look for that on my YouTube channel. Thank you. Bye.